What's up? Putty Sports Gamer here, and I'm got an old article. It's from the beginning of February, but I've been wanting to talk about this because it annoys the hell out of me with NBA players and the resting of NBA players. So we got an article here. The real problem with load management. Players don't owe fans anything, but the league does if it wants what it expects in return. I am an old schooler. I've watched basketball in the 80s and 90s. And you hardly ever see players resting. They've played every single game, barring an injury, but they were there. They were on the court. They were playing the games, playing 82 games. You haven't heard any complaining about, oh, I'm tired. They enjoyed playing. They wanted to be out there. And it seems to me lately, starting with the Spurs, as I'll get into, has changed. Players, to me, seem like the love of the game is less than the money of the game. The money of the game is more important than the love of the game, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comment below if you don't think so. This is the way I feel. And it's really tiring to see these players and coaches. It's mostly the coaches and team management. Yes, the players don't owe fans anything, but it's the coaches and the team management have been resting players. And I'm sure in the background what you don't hear is the players probably going to the coach saying, oh, can you give me a rest? I don't want to play today. Do I have to play? I bet any money that that's the case. So let's get into this article. The NBA's debate about load management, the practice of teams resting healthy players to preserve them for the balance of 82 game season and playoffs, is a rare one. It's rare because in an increasingly vapid world of sports, hooting and hollering, everyone is making fair points. My point in all this is, in the world today, as you can see, they're trying to make people softer and softer and softer. You'll see, back in the day, there were no participation trophies. There were no trophies for everyone. People wanted to win. And it was very competitive, but now you're seeing less and less of the competitiveness, and you're just seeing everyone win. Let's not hurt their feelings, boost their egos. And to me, the NBA is turning into like very soft players. Go look at highlights, and if I was a great YouTuber, I would show you highlights of back in the 80s and 90s playing games. There were fouls, there were people clotheslining each other, they were pushing hard, they were beating each other up every game. It was a more physical game back in the day. We see games now, these players, they complain about getting ticked on the arm. They complain about any little bit of contact. And players today are soft. And the thing is, they're making more and more money. I got a great quote from Charles Barkley later in this article to show you that they're making more and more money. They want to play less and less. That's why my point was at the beginning. They care more about money than they care about the love of the game. So it all started, and I seen this, with the San Antonio Spurs were making a fair point that they sent 4 aging stars home before a road game in 2012. Coach Greg Popovich angled to keep them fresh while more or less throwing away a big-time regular season game against the Miami Heat, whom his team would later play in the NBA Finals. Then Commissioner David Stern was making a fair point when he fined the Spurs $250,000 under the rule, resting players in a manner contrary to the best interest of the NBA. The best interest of the NBA is to have the best players playing, because people today are paying a ton of money to see an NBA game, and they don't want to spend all that money. It could be close to $1,000 if they get the lower seeds. It's definitely in the hundreds, upper hundreds, to see the NBA game. And you go to the game and all of a sudden the star players are resting. You're not even seeing the star players. How would you feel if that happened to you? It would piss me off if it happened to me. Like, I spent all that money and the star players are resting. But that didn't stop. After the Spurs, after that fine, it didn't stop. The Spurs kept on resting players that year. And the practice has persisted and taken on a semi-official label, and the debate has gone on too about whether it's okay for teams to tactically retreat from regular season games in the name of self-preservation. The NBA has hit teams with a few more fines and threats of fines, but loads have continued to be managed. And if you watch a team that is playing 2 games in 2 days, you would likely see one of its best players in street clothes. Yeah, that's what I laugh at that too. Back-to-back games. You can't play one of the games. You can't play 2 straight days. You're playing a game. And don't even tell me it's grueling. You're in shape. This shouldn't affect you. Like when I was in shape back in the day, I'm not in the shape anymore, but when I was in shape, I played every single day for hours in a day. Yet these players can't play 48 minutes back to back. All the timeouts and TV timeouts, you get so much rest during the game and you can't play. That's like a joke. You're making $40 to $50 million for the top players. These little players scoring 4 points, getting 2 rebounds are making $10 million a year, and you can't play every game. It's a joke. Like, players, I think, should be embarrassed. They should go to the management if the manager's forcing them to saying, I want to play. Stop resting me. Load management is no longer new, but the public conversation about it has hit a flashpoint over the past few weeks. Kevin Durant and Stan Van Gundy wondered in an amusing Twitter exchange why hamstring and groin injuries seem so prevalent not right now, despite the emphasis on rest and improvements in sports science. That's another thing. I guarantee you again that these injuries are not real. They put down this injury just to save face and not say do not play, rest. So they put an injury so they don't get fined, and so they could say, oh, we need to rest this player because of injury and not because we don't want to play him. Video went viral of a young Miami Heat fan holding a sign that said he flown more than 4,000 miles to see Jimmy Butler play. Learning that Butler might not play that night, Heat ruled Butler out with the injury not as load management case. Sometimes that line blurs. Again, I don't think all injuries are real. Nikola Jokic sat out a game against Giannis, denying fans a chance to see 2 players who have won the past 4 MVP awards go head-to-head. Former players who are now commenters weighed in as well. Richard Jefferson spoke passionately on ESPN about how bummed he would have been as a kid if the legendary David Robinson had sat out a game that Jefferson attended. Like I said, I would feel the same way, and I bet anyone who spends all that money to go to a game and drive a long distance to go to a game would be bummed about it too. And here's the quote with Charles Barkley. Sidebar, Charles Barkley was my favorite player growing up. I loved the way he played. He played with passion, unlike most of the players today. But he bemoaned the state of things with athletes making 40 to 50 million yet acting like they're steel mill workers. They play basketball. They don't have a hard job and they're making a ton of money. Play every game. Steph Curry wants people to know that players themselves don't push the rest. Steve Kerr wants the season to shrink to 82 to 72 games. That creates enough rest where we don't have to have some of these crazy situations. Crazy situations like playing back-to-back. Is that a crazy situation? I think you'll see way fewer games missed from players, Curry's coach argues. What if they do shrink the season? I bet their salaries won't shrink. If they shrink the season, you're going to see ticket prices way higher than they are now because these teams want to keep up that revenue. So they shrink the season, yes, they might not rest the players as much, but you'll see all the costs increase that goes along with that. Load management has gone quite well for some championship teams, including Curry and Kerr's Golden State Warriors. It's intuitive that resting players to avoid back-to-back appearances would reduce injuries. After all, it's not hard to find successful antidotes. But NBA injury data does not show the relationship panning out across the league, and load management might trouble teams in other ways, like by denying their best lineups the chance to build comfort and cohesion. The Los Angeles Clippers have load management the crap out of stars Kawhi Leonard and Paul George since signing them both in 2019. It hasn't gotten them to 50 regular season wins or a finals appearance. The team is hovering a few games of 500 with below average offensive rating this year. The Clippers built their team with load management in mind. Plan has not worked yet. These players need to play. It's like adding all these stars to one team is not going to guarantee success because they need to play well together. And if their load management gets in the way with these players playing with each other, the team is going to suffer. The offense is going to suffer. You can't just walk out there and play awesomely, pass well if you don't play together. It's a tense topic at a tense time. Load management effectiveness is uncertain for one thing. For another, it taps into the big questions about what sport fans deserve to expect from players and teams. The only obvious truth is that a lot of people are unhappy about their emergent status quo and that the NBA's watchability is worse when the best players for whatever reason aren't playing. Something should give. The NBA's league office will probably have to be a spearhead. Yes, I think they need to take a stand at league and tell teams they need to play these players. To hell with injuries. And that again puts me that the players today are soft. They get injured way too easily. They should not have all these injuries with, like I said, the sports science and the stretching they do, and they should not have injuries. Especially with NBA, where the contact is minimal. There is some contact, but it's not that great. It's not like football or anything. It's not like hockey. You don't see this problem in hockey, do you? The stars play. That sport is more brutal than NBA basketball would ever be. Yet, they'll play, and NBA players don't. And obviously, NBA players make the most money for what they do, I think, any sport. The NBA is an anomaly in star-sitting game. NFL stars suit up for every game if they're healthy, with the rare exception of final week games if a team has locked into the playoffs. Major League Baseball best players get scheduled off days in an 162-game grind, but often play well into the 150s. The NHL matches the NBA's 82-game schedule on a similar timeline and has nothing like load management. The best players appearing in the vast majority of games, with few or no planned absences, is the norm. Like I said, the NBA players and management, in my opinion, are feminizing these players. They're turning them soft. They're turning them weak. They're making them want to take days off. Because, hey, you're getting paid. You're still getting paid all that money. I don't blame the players, I guess. Because why not? Oh, you don't give me a day off? I'll take the day off. I don't care. I'm still making my money. I'll take the day off. I don't have to play. This is great. I'll just watch. But NBA teams and players have reasons to be cautious. The sport has culturally devalued its regular season with endless discourse about individual player and team greatness that focus overwhelmingly on the playoffs. Load management has furthered that dynamic. Postseason should be the ultimate aim point for any basketball operations staff, and load management fits into it. But basketball has also evolved into something different from the sport Barkley or even Jefferson played. As a longtime NBA journalist, Mike Prada retorted to Jefferson, the game is spaced out and put a premium on fast, tiring movements that the old guard didn't have to perform nearly as often. I think that's BS. The game was fast back then. Yeah, the players are more athletic nowadays, but the game was harder back then. It was more physical back then. So that explanation is BS. Combined with the never-ending amateur scene that puts heavy wear and tear on players before they even get to the NBA, the league's modern style of play is a meat grinder. Consider a player like Jokic, a 6'11" center who could dribble and make shots from anywhere, or consider Curry, who can and will pull up from just inside the half court and drop a devastating three-pointer on a team that doesn't guard him closely from distance. Consider that three-point attempts have more than doubled this century, and that a more spread-out sport means more area for everyone to cover, dozen times per game. Today's players are insanely fast and demand defenders to chase them around all night. Oh, do I really feel bad for these players having to chase players? Yeah, they say the three-point line, they don't have to run as far. They don't have to run to the paint. They just pull up from three. So these offensive players are not exuding as much energy as the past players. Past games are more of an inside grind, more physical. So I don't get this little explanation at the end. I don't get, because it doesn't make sense to me. The NBA was a much harder sport back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not even talking about 60s and 70s. I'm talking about just 80s and 90s than it is now, than it'll ever been nowadays. And these players are not playing as much. Larry Bird would never want to be benched. Or anyone. It's like Barkley. He played every game. What do you guys think? Do you think the NBA's players are just soft? That they don't care about the game as much as they used to? All they care about is money? Please let me know in the comments below. And please subscribe and like. Thanks. See ya.